sources.
I'm on team those people. Okay, so in my mind, as someone,
but you don't agree with those people.
What?
But you don't agree with those people.
Oh, no. It has nothing to do with whether I agree with them or don't agree with them. I don't care about their politics one way or another. My thought in my mind is what's going to save the most people. And what's going to save the most people is us fighting our own government to go and do what it should have done in the first place, was to take a diplomatic stand and bring Putin to the table and get this shit in order.
What happens when the Ukrainians say no? What happens when the Ukrainians say no?
You know what? If the Ukrainians don't want to work with us and what we're doing, then they don't get our help. It's like this. I have a kid, right? You want the help? You're on the payroll? That's the deal. My opinion counts. And I do not think we should leave them. I think that we should have taken a stronger
This is being done out of
stance.
interest for them, right? This is to save lives. We're going to make the Ukrainians accept a deal, an occupation that they don't want.
No,
because we don't want them to sacrifice that.
Force them to maintain whatever their election was, whatever the vote was that they had that wasn't installed, or whatever, or have another election, or have whatever it is
what
you
do
want
you
to
mean
do
another? But
democratically.
this is the fear that Ukrainians have. They saw the death pits, they saw the torture, they saw what happened. And if they make a deal which allows the Russians to keep that occupied territory, they're just going to enshrine that behavior in occupied territory. And they're fighting a post-colonial struggle.
I don't know that. And I'm going to tell you why I don't know that. Because when I hear you talking like that, and I appreciate that it is a legitimate concern, I do. But it is very reminiscent to me of when I hear the Zionists saying, if we don't get them, they're going to get us.
Well, we have a proven track record of castration, of hammer executions, of death pits that have been uncovered. The largest mass grave uncovered in Europe since the Yugoslav genocides was uncovered in Izium. Over 444 bodies, many of which with their hands tied behind their backs and bullets in their skulls. We have no reason to believe that behavior is stopped in occupied territory.
So let's say that is the case, and that we need to protect them for that, because I agree that's horrible. So we need to do something to make sure that doesn't happen. Okay, here's where the disconnect is for me. I don't see how maintaining a war that is not seemingly going anywhere, and we can't seem to get an answer for strategy, is going to accomplish that goal. And I do agree that the goal is to prevent Ukrainian people from dying. Like I said,
100%.
I am on team whoever it is who's dead and their families. And so what I'm saying to you is, in my world and life experience, more arms, more war, more that is not the solution, and it doesn't lead to a better outcome. That's just my life experience.
So
I agree with what you're saying.
You believe that more war in any instance always leads to a worse scenario?
I believe that since World War II, yes.
So World War II was the only war worth fighting since then?
Again, it might be a war worth fighting for the people there, but in terms of our involvement in it, it should be diplomatic. It should be forcing our hand, using our bully pulpit, using our power with the world. We don't do it because we don't want to. How
does this not create a world where might makes right?
No, that's all it's doing, is creating a world that might makes right now.
If we say Russia invades Ukraine, and if they don't accept if they're not willing to accept our diplomatic settlement where they sign away who knows how much land, but sign away presumably at least the land that the Russians control now.
Then let me ask you, what is there? See, again, I don't hear any strategy.
Can I say something?
Strategy. I said the strategy was to isolate Crimea's logistics by destroying the Black Sea Fleet, 20 of which they've destroyed in just the last 4 months.
So they can do that? What's the time?
I can't give you a hard date any more than anyone who fought any war can give you a hard date on when the war is going to end. But that's how wars are fought. Wars are not fought on tight time schedules.
Wars are fought since World War II that is effective. What war has been effective since World War II?
You mean like American involvement, or just war generally?
No. I'm serious.
The Algerian independence struggle, I would say, was an effective war by the Algerian resistance that led to the French being kicked out.
Resistance. Okay, so that's good. But okay, so then let's take it a step further. What war that we've been financing, funding, whatever,
been involved in? You mean? That was successful? I would say the intervention in Yugoslavia led to a quick end of the conflict.
And how many people, right? Okay, but how did we interfere though? And what did we do? And was it the same as this? It wasn't really.
It wasn't the same because there wasn't a nuclear power involved, because so this way we have to interfere more or get involved more indirectly.
I just don't think the way to be involved is more fighting. Like, I just don't think
I think that it's just I feel that the idea that all wars that come, the one solution is just going to be ending it as soon as possible because death is bad. There's other factors at play here. People in Ukraine don't want to live under occupation.
And that's fine. They'll live during war.
Well, then that's what they're willing to do. The last Kiev Sociology Institute poll came out that said 2 out of 3 Ukrainians said that if all Western aid to Ukraine stopped, they should continue to fight the Russians until they reclaim everything. So my view on this is, if we stop sending aid, there's a real risk that the Ukrainians will just say, politically, demographically, when it comes to the future of our country, we don't want to lose 80% of our country, our coastline, to become a rump state, and they're going to keep fighting, but then with less support, which then is just going to lead to more people dying. I remember going back to Kharkiv the second time. I was there the first time when the electrical grid was getting targeted. It was awful. It was terrible. The city was getting regularly shelled. Then the Ukrainians pushed the Russians away from Kharkiv during the Kharkiv counteroffensive. And then when the city was no longer in range of artillery, more civilians came back. The city started to prosper more. So if we're going to talk about how to save civilian lives, as of right now, until we know that the Russians are really serious about coming to a real compromise with the Ukrainians that both sides can live with, then we have to support them in their resistance to give them the best position to negotiate.
Two things. So the expansion of NATO to Russia's border, which effectively would have been bringing Ukraine.
We're already at Russia's border in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland, and Finland now.
So it's been expanding for hundreds of miles when it was not supposed to. And
according to who?
That is our role that we have played in basically poking the bear.
Lots of things.
And to me, that is a huge part of the equation, Dylan. And then the other question I would have is: would you greenlight American troops getting involved in this conflict?
No, I wouldn't greenlight American troops getting involved in this conflict. And the Ukrainians aren't even asking for American troops to get involved in this conflict. They're asking for equipment so they can fight the struggle themselves and we can fulfill our commitment we made to them in the 90s when they asked them to give up their nuclear arsenal, which I think, again, for nuclear non-proliferation and just sticking to our word is an important thing to do. Not to mention European stability people talk about national security interest as such a buzzword, but European security is genuinely an American national security interest. Our main export is Europe. The majority of our goods that are exported go to Europe. Outside of the United States, the euro is the second largest world reserve currency. This is not just a question about your Ukrainian stability or Ukrainian security. This is also a question about European stability. If you listen to Putin's speech at the start of the war, he said that every post-Soviet state's borders was created artificially. This is an ideological foundation to go past Ukraine, and people think, oh, that's fear mongering. I'm not saying that they're going to move into Estonia, but when you talk about countries like Moldova, which are not in NATO and already have Russian soldiers illegally stationed within them, and they've been funneling money into it for years, I do think it's a real concern. The Moldovans think it's a real concern. The Poles, the Estonians, the Latvians, and the Lithuanians think it's a real concern. And if we retract from this continent and just say, you know what, we're going to just focus on American issues. If our interest is nuclear nonproliferation, the message that's going to be sent is, you're not covered by the American nuclear arsenal, get your own nukes, race for it. And that's something that I think is bad for Americans. I think that's bad for Europeans. I think it's bad for the world.
I think it's also fair to say that because our country, and you're in Baltimore, is that correct? Or that's where you're from?
I'm from Maryland.
Okay. So it's fair to say that we also have a really strong anti-war streak in this country that's been growing steadily, and it's been growing much more steadily on the populist right. But I think a big reason for that is because so many families were adversely affected by the war in Iraq, and that's where a lot of that fervor tends to come from. I also think because we live in a country without healthcare, without a living wage, without a real jobs program for working people that can sustain dignity, among other things, like retirement and whatnot. When you take a lot of these things into account, criminal justice, the environment, and so forth, it's easy to see why so many people want to have these conflicts come to an end as soon and as swiftly as possible. So if we can put a bow on this, and you're putting your hat on of, let's say, peace negotiator, how would you want this conflict to end in the soon, and what would be the most realistic circumstance that this
as realistic to do it as soon as possible?
What would be?
to get a ceasefire, because a peace, I would make a differentiation between a peace deal and a ceasefire. Because if you just cease fighting and then start fighting again in 6 months, you've not really solved anything. You got to
No, but if you have
right?
a ceasefire, the more once fighting stops, the easier it is to make it stop completely. That's a fact.
It can be, but also there's nothing necessarily, unless we put something durable in there to stop this, there wouldn't be anything necessarily stopping the Russians from reigniting the war once we had lost attention, which, according to Russian military doctrine, that has been the strategy throughout the post-Soviet world before, and we have no reason to believe that the Russians have necessarily given up on their original goals, especially if they think the West is losing interest. As for what was your other question besides the peace deal? Getting a peace deal as soon as possible right now would probably be some version of a ceasefire between the Ukrainians and the Russians, where the Russians at the very least control what they have right now. Whether that would lead to a sustainable ceasefire would depend upon whether or not there was anything strong stopping the Russians from invading again, like a unilateral defense pact between the United States and Ukraine, or the United Kingdom and Ukraine, or, and this is why I say this, NATO membership, because no NATO member state has ever been invaded by the Russians, and it's the only 100% guaranteed so far strategy to stopping Russian invasion, which is why the Estonians, Latvians, Lithuanians, Poles, and all these countries joined in the first place after the Russians reasserted themselves in Chechnya, bombing it and making it the most destroyed city in the world, according to the UN. That was if you look at a lot of NATO member states, when did they join? 1999, the same year when the Russians, Chechnya.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.